Welcome to Legacy and Leadership with David McKean. In my 20 plus years in the business world, I have noticed a common theme amongst all my clients. They're phenomenal leaders who are concerned about leaving a legacy in three main areas: community, family, and financially. Join me as we talk to proven leaders in their field about their specific ideas behind legacy and leadership. Welcome to Legacy and Leadership with David McKean. I am honored today to have Dr. Alec Flynt join us and share some insight on his leadership through the years. Dr. Flynt graduated undergraduate from University of Florida. He went on to get his master's in theology from Princeton University and later his doctorate from Reformed Theological Seminary. Mm-hmm. After completing his doctorate, Alec spent some time in Baton Rouge at a church, but he has been the senior pastor of Covenant Presbyterian for almost 11 years. Am I right on that? 11 years?
12.
12
on 13.
Wow, I shorted you.
Yeah.
I shorted you a year, yeah, 12. But during his tenure at Covenant, the church has just exploded in growth. And it's been phenomenal personally for me to witness over the last 5 years that growth. He has a wife, Arden, and also 3 children that I'm familiar with. But welcome, Alec, to Legacy and Leadership.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.
Absolutely.
All right, let's do it.
So I joined the church, Alec, in February of 2020, right?
Man, that was an interesting time to join the church.
Yes, absolutely. Not knowing what was around the corner. None of us knew at that point. Of course, we're referring to COVID, but I watched you lead fearlessly amid the uncertainty of the time. I'd love to really jump inside your brain and begin to understand, what was your process for leadership? And if you tell our audience, with such instability around the world at that time.
Yeah, that's a great question. That was a sort of crucible moment in with leadership. So I think that's a great place to start. And kind of showed our cards a lot of ways, and I would say, it's a great example because everything was just up in the air. No, is unprecedented. You can't read a book on this. You're calling everybody, what are they doing? What are you doing? Nobody knows what to do. Nobody's been through this before. And that's, I think, when leadership becomes really important. So I think the process was, first our heads are all spinning. You remember this? They're shutting the world down, and they're shutting down the core of what we do, which is gathering for worship. Couldn't be together in a big room, and everybody's saying we're the disease and the fear and all these sorts of things, and the world's coming apart, and you're sitting at home. And I think our process, which is a great question to ask. Well, first of all, I would note, I didn't do this in isolation. Okay. And that was a big leadership thing for us. I have a group of elders, a board that we meet with, which is just such a critical part of leadership because you can't know everything. And we had doctors on that board, and we had business people, and we had folks involved in government. So we had people that were really smart, really wise, experts in their areas, and they were coming together to give information and their wisdom. And now my job was to sort of bring all that together and sort of say, this is the way we're going. But that piece right there was really big. And, we just, process began with prayer. Like, what are we doing, Lord? Where are you going? But I think it quickly moved to principles and values, which was just for me has been the idea of leadership, right? Which is, what are you about? What's the DNA? I'm not the best vision guy. Okay. But I think I'm pretty steady with the principles and values and understanding sort of like, this is who we are. This is what we're about. And so when it was funny with Corona because, the name of the church when it first started, we hadn't thought of a name yet. And it was Jesus Lead Us, because it was kind of, we don't know what we're doing. Right. We don't know where we're going. Right. Jesus Lead Us. So we had some practice in that, right? We had a sense from the beginning of like, we don't know where we're going, but we're going to trust Christ in that. And so that was a big part. But one of the things that really came up was an early value of ours that people would just say to us as they were a part of the church was, hey, we just we want to worship together. We want to follow God together. And so that was an early value. So then when the pandemic hits, the world is falling apart, right? And everyone's, there's all this fear, and so what do? We go back to our values, which is like, we need to come together. We need to worship God. We need to bow before Him and remember who He is and remind each other of that. And so I remember we went back really quickly into worship, and I think everybody will frame this how they want to frame it, but there were people that were doing that stuff for political reasons and to make sort of giant statements about things, but it really wasn't about that for us. And I think sometimes people misread that. For us, it was really back to the values of like, the world is falling apart. We need to get together and remind ourselves of who God is. And so that those first principles sort of dictated what we were going to do. And, we had lots of other regulations, and we told people like, hey, it's no problem if you're not there. And we tried to spread out all that, blah, blah, blah. But I think the move sort of played our hand in a lot of ways and revealed something that had maybe been going on with us that hadn't been seen, which is like, this matters to us, right? God matters to us, like in the worst moments. And like we're not giving this up. Right. This is essential to who we are. And so as a leadership decision, it became very sort of clear, because it was, here's what we're about, and that dictated it in that situation. And it was something that was true of us all along, but I think Corona really sort of brought it to the surface, whereas for other people, it wasn't the same set of values. Right. It wasn't the same, set of dictates. And so that was a big moment for us, I think.
You mentioned that compared to other people, you came back early in terms of the congregation meeting on a regular basis. I remember very vividly how strong opinions were of what should be done. And it seems like, from my perspective, everyone had an opinion.
Oh, man.
How did you deal with those strong opinions and perhaps people that disagreed with your direction?
That's a great question. I think we were very upfront and honest about what we knew and what we didn't know. And I look back and I don't regret the things that we said, because we were honest about where we were at each point. I think sometimes in leadership, leaders will gaslight their followers a lot and say, or they'll lie, so we were really clear up front, like, this is unprecedented. We don't really understand what's going on. We're not making this decision because we grasp this better than some other agency or something that's going on. We're doing this for our principles, first principles of, hey, when the world falls apart, we cling to God and each other. And we always were very clear, look, we think there's risk. We know there's risk. And we're not trying to mitigate that risk. We're just saying that this is a higher value to us than those things. And so I think that made it really easy. We also gave people a lot of freedom. We didn't, for us in those moments, it was like, we didn't claim. I think there were churches, I'll take churches, for example. There were churches on the right and the left that were both claiming such authority over people, and the government was doing, and we just sort of said, listen, we love you, we trust you, we want to get together. If you don't feel comfortable with that, that's fine, because there's just an unknown. But I think being honest with people and being fair to ourselves about, like, this is an unprecedented situation, we don't know. And I think in leadership, a lot of times people are scared to do that. So it kept a lot of the criticism away, because you would come and criticize it and you go, well, you're right. And we said that, like, we don't know what we're doing. Right. And we don't think you really know what you're doing either. Nobody does. So that made it a little bit simpler, but it was stressful. It was definitely hard. You were very worried. You're more worried that someone would get sick and die, and then it would be, but there was just hey, we had to trust Christ in that. And especially, I will say, like, when we looked at some of the facts, it was like, okay, if you're older, please, this isn't the best thing to do at this moment. We think the risk is not there, but we were just really honest and didn't try to know more than we knew.
You you display a lot of humility when you say things to the effect that we don't know what we're doing or this is unprecedented. Many leaders try to uh, act as if they know
Yeah.
everything all of the time and that they are the only one that can lead and they are the strong leader. How have you developed humility in your leadership over the years?
Well, I've probably gotten smacked down plenty of times.
You and me both, buddy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's one of those things. I think what I've learned is um, trust is the currency of leadership, right? I mean, it is the thing that you are operating under all the time, and so if you forsake trust, you are going to be bankrupt in leadership. And so I think what it comes to in humility is, maybe it's not so much a great moral thought. It's just the fear of going, if I say something that maybe isn't true
Yes.
or is wrong, it may work in the short run, but it's not going to work in the long run. Right. And I'm going to lose the trust of people for the next time I want to say something. So when I'm speaking or communicating, I need to be very sure about what I'm saying, that if I don't know what the answer is, I need to be clear about that. And then people trust you when you say you don't know what the answer is, because then they know when you do know the answer, they tend to follow you. So I think the humility in that, of course, there's a lot to say about humility, but I would say it's more about just trying to build up the bank of trust with people so that they know when you are saying, let's go this way, and this is the right thing, they go, okay, because he's willing to say he doesn't know, or even willing to say he was wrong on things.
Yeah, I think that's phenomenal. And I want to reiterate for our viewers and listeners, trust is the currency of leadership. I think that is a phenomenal nugget that quite frankly, we could spend the rest of our time
No,
on
for sure.
discussing, because that in and of itself is a lot to chew on. So thank you for that. One of the things you mentioned were principle and values along the way. And some might think that as a church or as a Bible believing church, that comes easy in terms of establishing those principles and values, right? Yet there are denominational arguments all the time and things like that. How did you arrive to the guiding principles and values for the organization for which you?
We don't necessarily even have them written down in any specifics. Sure. I mean, I think you heard one. I mean, the principle that we're people that want to worship together. That was from people. I mean, that was just from listening to people and hearing like this is actually what's motivating them very early on in the beginning, and what sort of became the the DNA of the place, and just that picking that up. So, but of course, I mean, for us, when we look at the scripture, it arrives out of that and out of our tradition. I mean, a long history of those things, and we have connection to across, other churches in the country and the world. And so I think those things are, aren't quite as complicated as you think, especially for it might be different for somebody in a business situation, right. But for us, I mean, I think it's pretty clear. You might be asking me more a hermeneutics question, a question of interpretation of the Bible than anything else, because why churches, have different views on things that seem so clear. Your guess is as good as mine. I think when it says certain things, it means certain things. And so we've just always taken that approach. And that's been, that's a first principle for us, I would say, is, hey, we're going to follow what the scriptures say, even when it disagrees with us. So I don't know that that's true for everybody.
Sure. But I think your point is that you let those values and those principles guide you, and quite frankly, for our audience members, whether you're starting a business or whether you own a business, my advice and what Alec is echoing is to have guiding principles and values that you filter every decision.
Yeah, that's right.
And it then can take what might seem like a complex decision, and once you review your principles and values, there's a clear step to
I mean, yeah, and Corona is such a great example of that. That was one of the more complex moments of leadership because it just involved something that you didn't really understand.
Sure.
And but it became a pretty simple decision because you had the values and guidance. And that, and that's where I talk. I mean, vision's really good, but you can have vision and all of a sudden Corona breaks out, and you're like, well, let's just throw all that out the window, and we're gonna all sit 6 feet apart, and and so I think that's where the principles have always been big for me, and that goes into little things. I don't think it's just Corona. I think, when we sit here and we're talking and there's an issue, whatever it is, if it's an employee or if it's a situation with a congregational member, if it's hey, do we build a church? I mean, we're asking those same questions. And I think that's where the trust comes in, which is like, people know this is what we're about. And so when we make decisions, I think, and we filtered them through those things, there's a consistency where when people maybe disagree with those things, you at least go and say, hey, this is what we've always been about. Now I can't say that I do that all the time, but I mean, when you have to make a really hard decision that people are not going to be super excited about, it has to go back to those first principles in everything that you're doing. And really, to me, that's the big thing about leaders, right? I mean, if everybody's wanting to do it, you don't need a leader. Everybody just does it. But leadership is like, it's saying, hey, we got to go this direction, even when you don't really want to go that direction. And you got to be able to convince people. And part of that is laying the groundwork. And, I think one of the things for me that's unique that might be different for somebody in the business world or in your family or whatever it is I'm communicating on a sort of regular schedule that I think is a huge advantage, right? So I am communicating values and principles every week in a very explicit manner. And I think that, I can say I've messed that up at times with, let's say, staff. I sort of want them to know things implicitly that I don't make clear. And it's almost the exact opposite with the congregation. I am, I'm always teaching and I'm always leading towards these things so that when we come up against a situation, we go, hey, we've been talking about this for 10 years. Like in Corona, it's like, it wasn't hard to tell people, like, we know this is what we're about. We think God's sovereign and He's worthy of worship. We've been saying that over and over again. So bam. And that's a little bit of a leadership advantage that I have, that you probably have to be a little more explicit about. I think about with my kids, it's like leading my kids. Sometimes I need to teach more. I need to sit down and make those explicit times with them where I'm saying, here's who we are, here's what we do, and not have it attached to the dumb thing that they did that I'm trying to correct. You know what I'm saying? I mean, so that when they do the dumb thing, I can come back and say, remember? And they go, yeah, I mean.
Absolutely. I was listening to a podcast recently with Dave Ramsey, and he was talking about communicating his values to his employees.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, he's got a new book out, and he's a phenomenal success story on multiple levels. But in this podcast, he mentioned he's got over a couple thousand employees.
Yeah.
But what he said, to your point, is about the time that you're sick of communicating company values to your employees, that's the time you need to say it another 50 to 100 times.
Yeah. And I think those have to be the things you believe. I mean, we do that with our staff. It's like, I've been in these organizations and you have a values discussion. You're like, this is such a bunch of baloney. I mean, this is like window dressing, and then everything, there's not a consistency of those things. I think the consistency of it matters, so that like we do once a month, we'll do staff values, and we'll sit down and talk about things. And it's like, when I do them, I mean, I want to be able to say, okay, here's where you can see that. Here's why we do it this way. Not I'm making something up in my head and then doing something different on the other place. There's got to be a really disciplined approach to those sorts of things. So it's, if you communicate and you don't do, you got a problem. But if you do and you don't communicate, you also got a problem, right? They got to run along the same track.
So how did your leadership style change because of COVID?
I don't know if it changed a lot because of COVID. I'm not sure it did. I think it was just another challenge that was along the way. I mean, I think the world has been a little different since then. It's been a little topsy-turvy. I think I've had, and this was something happening before COVID. I mean, I think there were, I've had to be more explicit about things and teach more about things that people took for granted in the past. And I'm speaking a little more culturally now.
Sure.
You know, there were things in past generations. I mean, you wouldn't have to spend a lot. If you said marriage, everyone knew what that meant. Now, if you listen to me, I'm going to say marriage, one man, one woman, till death do us part. You know, I mean, so those types of things, you have to be a little more clear on. And the world got a little hairy there for a while. I will say, I think what's happened, and I think Corona was a part of this. I think what I've noticed over the course of my career is there is a lot more disaffinity for leaders than there were in the beginning when I started. I mean, there used to be a lot more willingness, a lot more sort of respect. But I think we're in a world where leaders are often frowned upon and looked down upon. And leadership is seen as something that is, sort of archaic or totalitarian. And yet, when we have an election, everyone's going berserk because why? Leaders are important, right? They're really important.
Sure.
And I think I see this with the younger generation. It's like I see their hesitancy to want to be a leader, and I hate that for them because I think there's some anti-institutionalism in them. I think there's the sense of like, I don't want to tell other people what to do. And that would, I think that's a wrong view of leadership. In my mind, I mean, one of the things that I think all the time about what I do in leadership is responsibility. It's not power.
Okay.
It's, and I think when you understand, like when I was younger and I was looking at my bosses and the people above me, I was thinking, man, if I could just get in that spot, I would do things totally different and better than they did. And these guys don't know what they're doing. And, some of that's kind of some healthy moxie. But what I didn't realize, I think my inherent thought was like, I'm going to get there and I'm going to have the power to do things the way I want. And what I missed in that was, actually, that's not what it is. It's a sacred responsibility to the people that you're leading. And so, you have to have, I mean, for me, it's a great love for the people that I'm leading, a great care. I mean, this is a first principle, right? Yeah. That what we're doing every time is to say, I'm always acting in a way that I think is in the best interest of the people that I'm serving and not myself. Right. So, I mean, you see this on the national stage. I mean, ego and power and those kinds of things seem to be what draw a lot of people into leadership, but great leaders aren't that way. So, I draw an analogy to parenting, when I'm with my children, I'm not always going to do the thing they want me to do because it wouldn't be good for them. So, I mean, it doesn't mean that you're doing what people want, but it has to be motivated by, I love these people. I'm responsible to God for them. Right. And I hope in the end that they understand that and see that, but it's a responsibility.
It is. And
that's sort of a change. I think so when you look at leadership now, all the negative view on it, I think it's sad because there is such an opportunity to serve people. And it takes, man, you got to have a lot of guts. You got to have a lot of backbone. It's tough. Like you go to sleep at night and you've made a decision and, a bunch of people are mad at you and you're kind of like, I don't need this. Like I got a lot of other, and I think that's the thing for me about leadership too, is like, I'm not sure I got into this fully understanding I was going to be a leader. Like for me, I think it was like, there was the craft of being a pastor that interests me. Right. And I think a lot of people have this, like you have the craft of, that you're good at and that you love. And then all of a sudden, as the craft moves out, you've got to begin to lead because now you've got this sort of following that's happening. And, that was kind of, you're not asking this, but it sort of leads into it. But I think my biggest leadership mistake was in that moment when, I had to sort of switch over from the craftsman to the leader, and I didn't do it very cleanly. Now that happened right before Corona. It was probably 2018, 2019. And the church had grown, and it had grown to the spot where it was getting painful for me. The way I was running things was all trains came through me.
Yep.
And that's not leadership. That's just me being a craftsman, and then working at a high capacity, and sort of the realization that I was holding the organization back. That was a big thing. I mean, that was like a sort of I had a man call me, an older mentor, and he said, listen, if you don't figure out how to stop holding this organization back, I'm going to call and ask for your resignation in a year. I'm like, who are you going to call? He's like, I'm going to call your elders. And I'm like, my resignation? What are you talking about? He's like, I just think you need to resign if you can't figure it out. And that was such a bold statement. He was doing it more for effect than reality. But that sort of unleashed a year of kind of figuring out, like, how do I not be the center of all of this, as much control as there is in that, and much ego. It was kind of like, I've got to build a system that doesn't require me in all situations, in order for this thing to sort of spread out. Because there's a limit, like in my situation as a pastor, I would say it's 150 people. I'd say if you're a high capacity pastor, I think you could pastor 150 people.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So maybe 200.
Right.
But beyond that, until you figure out how to lead something, you're not going to get past that point. And I think a lot of people get stuck right there. I see this a lot, especially in my business. They get stuck at that point of taking the leap to sort of being able to scale and move out on a bigger level. And that requires developing leaders and building systems and, spending money and all those kinds of things that are risky and tough. And you have to change. I had to change a lot. I had to sort of be okay with, not everything running through me all the time.
Yeah.
And I think it's made me a better leader. I think Bezos said this, Jeff Bezos said this a couple of years ago. He said, really as a leader, you're getting paid to make a few strategic decisions every year.
Wow.
And when he said that, I was like, man, I don't want to tell my bosses this, because it would seem like I'm a little overpaid at that point.
Yep.
But it is 100% right. Like, when I look back, there are 2 to 3 decisions I make a year that I think are really impactful and sort of pay my salary. And now I'm pastoring and doing the craft otherwise. Right. But in terms of leadership, I'm really making 2 to 3 decisions a year. And to do that well, I've got to have enough space and room and not be in the sort of frenzy of the day to day, right? I mean, I can't have people coming in my office all day with questions of this and that, and what are we doing with the napkins, and what color's the carpet, and all this. There's got to be room, sort of step back and think about stuff.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Legacy and Leadership with David McKean, and you're able to take away proven tactics that you can implement in your day-to-day life regarding legacy and leadership. If you have questions or ideas for future shows, I'd love to hear from you. You can reach me at 251-648-6461, or you can email me at legacyandleadershipgoal@gmail.com. Thanks so much for joining us.